Hello, everybody.
Nope.
Finals. Right. How exciting. Just to confirm, we have Nicole and Bennett versus Tuesday and Will.
Yes.
Okay. I can only speak for myself, but I'm James, one of the three judges, and I'm ready.
Yeah, I am good as well.
All right, so if everyone is ready, are my opponents ready? Okay, then the AF will be going first. All right, let time start now. We affirm resolve the United States should establish a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement with the European Union. Our first contention is on pandemics. COVID-19 won't be the last pandemic we ever experience. Spkr 24 warns the chance of a pandemic with a similar impact to COVID-19 is 1 in 50 in any year. The affirmative trade agreement is key to mitigating and preventing new pandemics. Olson 21 warns during pandemics, transparency can be the difference between life and death. If legal regulatory changes are not well conceived, during shipments, even slight delays have disastrous results. Thankfully, bilateral free trade agreements contain provisions on transparency. SCAP 22 explains that to be prepared, findings imply the need of lowering of tariffs, reduction in restrictions, and ensuring supply of vaccines, all provided by the affirmative trade agreement. There are two impacts. First is death. Lodi 24 reports the World Health Organization warned the most likely new pandemic could result in 20 times more fatalities than COVID-19, about 50 million people. Second is poverty. Lara and Mendoza Ramos 21 writes, the COVID pandemic added 85 to 115 million people in the extreme poverty in 2020. Our second contention is on a recession. The U.S. economy is in danger. The VISE 23 finds inflation is at 6%, salaries having kept pace with inflation, the average income to maintain a comfortable lifestyle rose by 20% between 2022 and 2023. Thus, Federal Reserve Bank of New York 24 finds there's a 52% probability of a recession by May 2025. Affirming will save the economy in two ways. First, trade. $22 says a part of the inflation problem can be attributed to supply chains, and a free trade agreement would solve this by increasing supplies. Tariffs are also historically bad for economic growth. York 23 reports current tariffs reduce long-run GDP by 0.21% and employment by 166,000 full-time jobs. Hamel 17 states an agreement between the two economic powers will not only boost the EU's economy by 120 billion euros, the US economy by 90 billion euros, but also the economy of the rest of the world by 100 billion euros. And the Cato Institute said this would generate positive spillovers for many developing countries. A free trade agreement would end trade barriers. $22 says the TTIP would have eliminated 98 to 100% of tariffs, 10 to 25% of non-tariff barriers, and increase the US GDP by 75 billion. But the second way is jobs. Atlantic Council and others 15 writes, the TTIP would add $865 to each US family household and over 740,000 new US jobs. Pi 21 finds free trade agreements grew the US economy by 0.5%, 500,000 additional jobs, and $133 billion in additional two-way trade. There are two impacts. First is domestic poverty. Para 8 writes a recession will increase unemployment and increase poverty by 10.3 million people. But the second impact is the global spillover. Hover 23 warns with the US as the largest economy globally, a US recession will tip the Eurozone into recession. Historically, Harrison 22 writes that there have been 4 global recessions since World War II, and in each case a US recession preceded the global one. Bradford 13 warns that the next economic shock will throw 900 million people into poverty. Our third contention is on climate change. Urgent climate action is critical now. The United Nations warns emissions needs to be cut by half by 2030, but we are drastically off track of goals. Affirming is vital to action on climate change. We have two warns. First, green policies enhanced by the US and EU collaboration. EU laws have very high standards. As Jutton 23 writes, EU trade deals have included a dedicated trade and sustainable development chapter encompassing provisions on the protection of the environment. Second is the rest of the world. Bradberg 23 writes a coordinated transatlantic approach could convince other major players to follow. Porterfield 22 writes US and EU discussions could help build on initiatives like the proposed climate club in the G7. Currently, Benson 24 writes the EU and US align on desire for green growth and decarbonization, but also face potential foreign retaliation. Parties need to identify supply chain vulnerabilities, conclude deals, and move supply chains where risk is less pronounced. Thus, the best method is a bilateral trade agreement. There are two impacts on a climate crisis. First is staggering death. Casella 23 finds for every 0.1 degrees Celsius of warming, the world suffers around 100 million deaths. Second is developing countries. Because developing countries don't have the resources to combat climate change, Whiteman 13 finds that 80% of the effects of climate change will be felt in developing countries alone. Stanford University 19 finds that climate change has increased economic inequality between developed and developing countries by 25%. Thus, we affirm.
I'm Tuesday Taylor, and I will be first speaker for the neg. Yeah. Okay. It's going to be one-off. Disclosure theory. Interpretation. Debaters must, on a page on the NDCIPF 2023 to 2024 wiki with their name and the school they attend, disclose the full citations and the full text of the card of any pieces of evidence which they have read in their case in a previous round before the round. To clarify, disclose your broken cases. Violation. They have not posted sites. They don't even have a wiki page. Our sole standard is argument quality. 2 internal links. Foreknowledge, a world without disclosure rewards debaters for running arguments, not because they are good, but because their opponents won't know how to respond. Disclosure forces debaters to commit to quality. Under my interpretation, debaters would have to write cases knowing that their opponents will have the opportunity for thoughtful preparation. Cross-pollination. Debaters can use and modify the best ideas from each other's wikis, ultimately leading to the development of a better version of the argument. Argument quality is a voter because debate is a unique space in which we need to have in-depth education about important issues. Inclusion, 2 internal links. Intel. Otherwise, schools with big programs who bring more students and judges and are better connected will scout more rounds and have more flow. Disclosure equalizes that intel disparity. Research. Disclosure forces big, wealthy programs to put their prep on the wiki, meaning everyone has access to the best paywalled evidence and also keeps smaller programs up to date on the meta. Voters. Education. It's the reason for why schools fund debate and the only portable skill of debate. Inclusion. Without debate being the best it possibly can, they prevent teams from accessing the best benefits of debate in the first place. Evidence ethics. Misconstruing evidence is academic dishonesty and prevents actual engagement with the literature. If we win that disclosure is a good practice, you should drop the debater because it sets a precedent in favor of a positive model of debate because wins and losses determine the direction of activity. If you don't respond to this in the next speech, it's conceded for the round because theory is inherently pre-fight and thus the more important argument, meaning that before we can even debate in substance, there needs to be an attempt from both sides to resolve theory. Now onto the case. We negate the resolution. The United States should establish a comprehensive bilateral trade agreement with the European Union. Britannica defines protectionism as policy protecting domestic industries against foreign competition by means of tariffs, subsidies, and import quotas. Currently, protectionism is working. Harold 24 from Princeton University writes that the U.S. exports to the European Union and European imports from the United States are both up more than 25% from the past few years, and real wages for American workers grew in 2023. Harold continues the situation where both U.S. companies and U.S. workers are doing well, creates little reason to open U.S. markets to even more competition, reinforcing skepticism about a free trade argument. Therefore, our sole contention is climate change. A free trade agreement would conflict with current subsidies that create green tech investment, worsening climate change. Currently, countries are subsidizing their domestic green technology companies, which is a form of protectionist industrial policy. Bar 23 writes that protectionism is the primary reason for the passing of the Inflation Reduction Act, which promised massive investments by the U.S. government in green technology and invested $394 billion into going green. The Inflation Reduction Act caused other countries to compete for the climate crown. Bar 23 furthers that other countries responded due to U.S. efforts. For example, Japan gave $1 trillion worth of loans into green investments. Furthermore, Canada announced a $60 billion clean energy investment, and Australia announced its plan to become a green superpower. The Syria writes that the EU also just published a plan to bolster green tech production as a response to the Inflation Reduction Act. Without protectionism, the world would not be seeing this race at the top. Henrich Foundation 24 writes that U.S. subsidies, like the Inflation Reduction Act, are the best way to achieve environmental goals and will conflict with the international trade deals. That's terrible. Denver 23 writes millions of lives can be saved by preventing each tenth of a degree of warming. Voting aft risks losing those lives due to climate efforts being shut down by a trade agreement. Therefore, to save the environment and keep climate efforts on track, we urge a negative ballot.
Okay, so I believe it's first cross now.
Yeah.
All right, so since I'm first speaker, I'll be going first. Just give me a second. Okay, so let's start now. So for the climate change, I guess that's your main point, right? So for climate change specifically, can you explain like exactly why the Inflation Reduction Act would actually help like climate policies be more effective?
Yes, so it would help climate policies be more effective because it invested $390 billion into green tech.
Okay,
And
so
that caused like other countries to start investing more and more money and that can go to the EU.
So you're saying that that evidence is from bar 23, right?
Yeah. No.
Yeah. It's not. Okay. What we're saying is, so why are we resorting to protectionism when we should be actually tackling climate change like which is a global problem? Why shouldn't we be tackling that with further collaboration between nations?
Cooperation is way too slow. Countries want to solve climate change differently, so it's best if competition is
Okay.
happening.
Do you have a card for that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. You guys can send it. So.
Yeah, listen to the card.
All right. If you want a question, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. On the economy, why is the TTIP a good example when it doesn't account for like Brexit?
Why would that like actually hurt the economic growth? The main point here is that we're increasing trade between nations and we're fostering innovation, growth, and jobs. So I don't think that like just because like a few events happen in between TTIP and the present, I don't think that's actually going to hurt economic growth in any way.
Well, the UK isn't in the EU anymore.
That's one country out of the 28 that were
But
that
the
was
UK
it.
is a major trading, like a major.
Yeah, we understand. But the EU used to be comprised of 28, now 27. The UK was like one of all the other 28 countries that were combined to form the EU.
Okay,
So,
what about like other things like COVID in like Ukraine?
So how would COVID like actually? So are you saying that COVID would affect like supply chains and stuff? Are you saying that, or why
Like
would
the
COVID?
COVID in Ukraine economies became more globalized.
Okay, but okay. Wait. So can you repeat that?
So like because of COVID in Ukraine, economies became more globalized. So why do we need TTIP?
If they became globalized, that's good. We need stuff like the TTIP to encourage even more trade and even more innovation and even more jobs. Like that's the whole point of free trade, in my opinion.
Okay, do you want a question?
Yeah, sure. So you're saying that collaboration efforts are way too slow. However, the Paris Agreement, what it did was it dropped like the century, like it used to be predicted that temperatures would raise by 7 degrees Fahrenheit, but now they're only going to be raising by 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And also countries during the Paris course, they like also like gave like billions of dollars to developing countries. So how can you say that collaborative efforts like these aren't going to be helpful?
We didn't talk about the Paris Agreement, but I'm glad you talked about that because climate change isn't really being solved with the Paris Accords. It's really slow. And
All right, that's fine.
have been invested, and that's fine.
Okay. So, sorry, I was just thinking something. The sign posting, it's going to go addressing the one-off and then talking about basically responding to their contention of climate change and the IRA. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Judge, the single narrative in this case is lives, and that is what the app is doing, saving lives. Now let's talk about their one-off. Their whole theory was based on the idea of the need for disclosure. Yes, disclosure is important in a debate. It keeps debate fair and educational. That's why both Bennett and I are willing to disclose any cards we provide, but they have not asked for cards, nor have they disclosed any of their cards before they read their contention, thus proving that they cannot hold us to the same standard to disclose before we read our contentions, as they have never asked us to done the same. If you drop us for not disclosing, then you drop them as well because they are being hypocritical with their theory of disclosing. Now let's talk about their case. Their sole contention was climate change and the IRA, but global collaboration for climate change is good and has always been in the past. We have multiple examples. 1, cooperation is not too slow. Let me point out that the IRA only really benefits the US. Sure, even though it may cost other nations to act, those countries are able to because they have the money. They are developed countries to be able to invest in green action. By approving for this protectionist action, you are leaving developing countries who don't have that ability in the dust. The UN literally states this by saying multiple developing countries do not have the money to support climate change action because they are in severe debt. That's why everyone needs to help, or else most countries can't act because of their lack of money. Second, this brings me to the point of why the Paris Agreement is good, contrary to what they say. 923 finds that experts predicted that global temperatures would rise about 7 degrees Fahrenheit. However, since the implementation of the Paris Agreement, it has decreased to about 5 degrees Fahrenheit. And the UN states that in the Paris Agreement, wealthier countries also committed to providing developing countries with $100 billion a year by 2020 for climate mitigation and adaptation. Because of this, we clearly see that global action can help everyone, not just developed countries. Now, my third point is other groups also provide similar funding. The International Solar Alliance, a group of 109 members, writes that it aims to mobilize billions of investments in solar energy solutions while delivering energy access to millions of people using clean energy solutions. With 9 comprehensive programs, a global approach clearly works with this example. Now let's talk about why protectionism itself and the act of not working with other people will not be able to solve climate change. This is for 3 reasons. 1, the IRA isn't as strong as perceived anyway. According to much touted claims, the new laws will reduce U.S. greenhouse gases by as of 2030 by around 40% below the 2005 level. Yet this claim is easily misunderstood. The Princeton study used to support it asserts that the legislation will reduce emissions by around 15% of 2005 emissions, with the remaining 27% reduction as of 2030 predicted to occur based on pre-existing trends. Even without the new legislation, put more simply, the actual reduction of emissions under the new law is likely to fail short of the widely advertised 40% relative to 2005. Clearly, the IRA isn't a solution for everyone. It isn't even a solution for the US in the current moment. It is clearly failing, and we cannot rely on protectionism to be our only source of fighting climate change. Now, second, Hayden 22 explained that protectionism risks hobbling trade's role in fostering the technological promise of the climate transition by raising the level of the carbon tax needed to affect that transition and weakening public support for it. And 3, bar 23, the card that states that the RA states that countries that engage in new green protectionism should be explicit about the limited role of protectionism because of the fact that global economic cooperation remains important. A new era of not trading and protectionism is not good enough to solve all of the issues that come with climate change. That's why you need to vote AF, because there are key ways we are actually addressing climate change with a free trade agreement. 1, green energy. Anderson 24 finds that increased trade and economic growth can also benefit the environment by supporting social welfare and encouraging investment and the development of green technology. And Irina finds that renewables and energy efficiency boosted by substantial electrification can provide over 90% of the necessary reduction in energy-related carbon emissions. Second is policy harmonization. Specifically, the EU implements the Trade and Sustainable Development Program into their FTAs, which was seen in the EU-Korea FTA, leading to an overall net reduction of 4.1 million tons in CO2 emissions. Because of this, it is a strong vote for AF. Thank you.
Okay. It's just going to start on the one-off. And then we'll go to what they just said on our climate contention, and we'll go down their case. Let me just get my doc up. All right, time starts on my first word, assuming everyone's ready. If someone's not, just stop me. Let's start on a disclosure theory. We say that debaters must disclose because A, it causes quality arguments, and 2, it causes cross-pollination. That's really important for the voters of education, inclusion, and evidence ethics. They have a couple of responses. First, they say that lives outweigh. I would say that theory outweighs every like argument that we're talking about related to the resolution, because theory actually will change what will happen in the future. Neither of us are actually going to be able to solve for an actual like trade agreement, but theory will actually incentivize debaters to do something that's like better and whichever like interpretation that they propose. But then after that, they say that disclosure is important, so they agree with us. But then after that, they say that we didn't ask for disclosure. Well, we couldn't ask because they don't even have a wiki page. They don't have a wiki page with any of their contact information. So we have no way of actually contacting them before the round to actually get their case so we can efficiently like prep it out and like have the best argument possible. Then they say that we didn't disclose. Check the wiki. We have our own page and we did disclose our net case right before this round. Then let's go to the point on the climate change. They say first, the IRA is bad, and that like the Paris like accords were really good because it resulted in billions. Well, the IRA resulted in trillions. We invested $390 billion into green tech, but that also incentivized other countries to act right after us. For example, Japan invested $1 trillion and Canada invested $60 billion. That's key because that's causing a chain effect of all these countries to compete against each other to be the country that is known for the best solvency for climate change. But then they say that the Paris Agreement worked. Why is it working right now so well if the United States literally left the Paris Accords? But even then, I would still say that the alternative of the status quo is better because we're investing trillions of dollars opposed to the couple billion that the Paris Accords achieved. Then let's go to the IRA, or let's go to the point of how like the IRA didn't work and how our data is skewed. They say that like the 27% from previous laws before the IRA were actually like to blame for the climate efficiency. However, I would still say that the IRA is one of the most biggest investments the US has ever done. It's $390 billion. We've never had that much money invested into green technology in the past. It's a really good effect. But the main takeaway from the IRA is the fact that other countries responded afterwards, and that caused these countries to compete with each other, which will be taken away if we have a trade agreement because protectionism will be nullified. But let's go to the point of how they say cooperation remains important. We agree. We're doing both cooperation and protectionism right now. We're cooperating with other countries to work on climate, but we're also doing protectionism. But what when we sign a trade agreement with the European Union, that's going to cause us both to have the force to work with each other, and because it's comprehensive. Then they say that there's policy like harmonization with the Korean FDA. A, the Korean FDA is from 2001. That's a really old piece of evidence. But secondly, B, I would still say that's not the US. Korea is not the United States. We don't know if the same effects will ensue. But let's go to their case where you cannot vote. First, on pandemics. The government already handles vaccine distribution with really good efficiency, as nearly all countries provided the COVID-19 vaccine free of charge to individuals at the point of delivery. But secondly, also countries just are incentivized already to work together because there's millions of people dying of COVID or any disease in the future. So they want to work together to ensure that they have the best vaccines possible for their people. But let's go to the economy. You cannot vote here under any circumstances because all of their evidence is outdated. On the first contention, they bring up the second contention, they bring up a failed trade agreement for 2016 called the TTIP, which is where they're getting their statistics from. This is really bad for them because the economy has massively changed over the last 2 years from things like COVID and the Ukrainian war, which made it impossible to turn back the clock. But even then, England is no longer in the EU, but it was when TTIP was proposed. The TTIP included England, which is a massive trading partner, so a lot of their statistics aren't even correct. But even then, they have no access to their economic impacts because EU Rights in 24 writes that American-made goods and the free trade agreement would not see success because 70% of Europeans stated they're going to try to buy locally more often and won't even buy American products. But with that being said, let's go to the point on climate change. Again, free trade agreements debt climate progress, as Catherine Inger of Corporate Europe Observatory finds. A free trade agreement threatens our ability to tackle climate change. Regulatory cooperation will require regulations to not get in the way of trade, and corporations will co-write legislation and push back against proposed climate or other public interest policies, because a trade agreement is just going to disrupt what we're doing right now, which is protectionism. But secondly, cooperation that leads out the world's largest polluters like Russia and China is doomed to fail. Dennison 24 writes that with concerns about the growing trade tensions between the US and China and uncertainty surrounding Russia's war in Ukraine, cooperation is never going to work. Protectionism is better because China and Russia are both incentivized to compete with the US to be the best at solving climate change. But if we work together, it's always going to exclude Russia and China because they don't want to work with the United States. That's going to cause nothing to get done. Vote for us to make the debate space safer. Vote for us to solve climate change.
Okay, you ready for us?
Yeah, you can have first question.
Okay. Sorry, I don't know if this is totally related, but do you have links to your wiki page? Because I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And you can ask a question.
I'll just send it after. Okay, so we'll just talk about like disclosure. So how are we supposed to like actually get the access to like our standards of like having the best debate possible if we can't contact you before the round? Because like that's how we need to get your case with sufficient like time so we can actually look at the case. But if we ask for it just like right before the round's about to start, like the constructive just starts about like 4 minutes later, it's not going to have much like purpose, correct?
Yeah, I totally understand that, but the thing is, you could have contacted us before round because we did actually debate you before, and because of that, you still have our emails. I'm pretty sure my partner might have emailed you too before round to see if you had won your previous round or something. So I feel like you could have totally contacted us if you wanted our cases, if you needed to, because you had our email saved.
I would say nonetheless, it still matters for like in like future rounds because you might not like debate your opponents in the future. Like you might have debated them before. So it's important to have a wiki page. But do you want a question?
Oh, sure. Okay. So you talk a lot about how basically the Paris Agreement is not helpful and all that. But the Paris Agreement helped developing countries, which I don't see you bring up once. Are you guys dropping developing countries?
We're not okay. So in our world, cooperation and protectionism are happening at the same time. It's not like the Paris Accords shut down, right? We're still helping those developing countries. But if we vote neg, we can also keep around protectionism, which is a second incentive for these countries to work against each other for the climate crown. Therefore, like having the best effects of both of our worlds. Does that make sense?
Sure, that makes sense. Okay,
Okay.
you can have a question.
Okay, so let's go to your like economic point, right? How can you like ensure that Europeans are going to buy American goods?
Okay, we're not ensuring that they can buy American goods. That's not our main point. Our main point is the fact that tariffs are currently hurting our world right now. And because of that, since the tariffs are hurting the world, the most likely result of a trade agreement between the US and EU, no matter what, would be to lower tariffs. And because of that, we can see less economic harms from protectionism and the act of employing tariffs. And even then, it's not only just about buying goods, it's the fact that you have, sorry, I was gonna go on a train of thought, but that's like,
No,
we'll expand more about the summary.
Yeah, do you want a question?
Sure. Okay. So your one contention was about climate change in the IRA,
Yes.
but okay. Can I have some? Sorry, I'm just gonna think about something real quick. Okay. Why do you believe that the IRA and protectionism is so good? Because protectionism isn't really as strong as you believe because of the fact that protectionism risks hobbling trade's role in technological performance of climate transitions, and also having that competition isn't always going to be effective in the future because of the fact that at some point we probably need to come up
Yeah.
with a
So
plan to
I
have
would
global
just say,
goals.
Just look to what's happening right now. A bunch of countries, Japan, Australia, the United States, Canada, they've all invested trillions of dollars into like solving green tech. So insofar as there's no cooperation that's done like that much worthy of investment, it's just easy to assume that protectionism is a good alternative. But we still have cooperation with status quo too. But that's time.
All right, thank you. I'll be taking 1 minute and 30 of prep. That will start now. Cut my summary. Help me cut my
Oh,
summary.
sorry. Do you have your wiki page link? Because
Yeah, I'm getting it up for you right now. Can you just put it
Okay.
in the chat that I can send it to? Because we didn't set up an email chain before.
All right, I believe that's time. So I will start in a moment. All right, so we're gonna first start like with their one-off, and then we're gonna go on our case, weighing in between, and then their case. All right. 3, 2, 1, go. First, starting on the one-up, they say that we should have a wiki page because other opponents would struggle, but this isn't other opponents. We knew that joining the round, we were willing to provide any cards that they asked for, and they had access to contact us. This is completely unfair to use to their advantage. They never give us any warnings in advance. Now on pandemics, there's 3 ways that a free trade agreement can help counter pandemics. First, free trade agreements harmonize countries. We saw this during COVID-19 as Hayden 20 finds the FTA between US and Australia allowed Australian companies and NYC hospitals to work together and improve preparedness. But also an FTA helps with medical supplies and standards. Third is on speed. Scott 24 finds that free trade agreement is a pact between 2 or more nations that reduces barriers to import and exports among them, and that now that goods and services can be bought and sold across international borders with little to no tariffs and other barriers. Gates 22 says that this is that the goal is to contain outbreaks within the first 100 days before they even have a chance to spread around the world. If we had stopped COVID before 100 days, we would have saved over 98% of the lives lost from pandemics. A free trade agreement allows for this urgency and efficiency that we are going on the app side. Now on recession, they never make a direct attack. Why Hamel 17 states an agreement between the 2 economic powers will not only boost the U.S. economies by 120 billion, the EU economy by 120 billion euros, the US economy by 90 billion euros, but also the economy of the rest of the world by 100 billion euros with 740,000 additional jobs in the US alone. They say the UK left EU. We already told you the UK is 1 out of the 28 countries in the EU. They also state a bunch of events. They never state how this would actually negatively harm or disprove our economic benefits. Now they say that that Europeans don't buy American goods. What about the $800 billion trades between the US and EU that are happening annually? We are preventing a recession that we say will happen with a 52% chance by next year. We completely win on economy. They are constantly trying to find weak analytics to disprove our empirics, which is not working. Now on climate change, we are addressing climate change in many ways. First on green energy, Anderson 24 finds that increased trade and economic growth can also benefit the environment by supporting social welfare and increasing investment in the development of green technology, and that renewable and energy efficiency boosted by substantial electrification can provide over 90% of the necessary reductions in energy-related carbon emissions. On developing countries, we already told you that this will have huge economic growth for developing countries, which would help them be able to combat climate change. But now cooperation over protectionism, because protectionism does more harm than good. It causes risk, as it risks troubling trade rules and fostering the technological promise of the climate transition by raising the level of the carbon tax needed for that transition. And now onto their case. They say that protectionism is good. We give you the Paris scores. They say that the US left will address this later. Now for the Paris scores, NUM23 finds that experts predicted the global temperature would rise about 7 degrees Fahrenheit. However, after the implementation of Paris Agreement, it would only rise about 5 degrees, and also encouraged Japan, China, EU, all to set carbon neutrality goals, which is crucial. They also gifted $100 billion to many developing countries that also encouraged them to join the fight in climate change. And for the US leaving Paris scores, US Embassy writes, literally today in 2021, the US officially rejoined the Paris Agreement. It's a clean vote for the affirmative.
Okay, can I get the card on how a trade agreement would have stopped COVID from happening? Or you said something along those lines, and I just sent the wiki page in chat.
Like what specifically do you want? We gave you like 3 examples of it helping pandemics. Like
Yeah.
which specific link do you want? Because we have many links for that. I'm just a bit.
I don't really need the link. I just need the fact that you said that there would be like 100, like we could have stopped COVID within 100 days, and that would have been different if we had a trade agreement. You said something like that. I just need that card.
Okay, well, just I'll send the cards later, but just to clarify, we said that it would just improve urgency and that the goal is to contain the outbreak within 100 days. But
Yeah, I need that. That's the card I need.
All right, you
Yeah.
want the goal? Okay, that one. All right.
Yeah, okay.
Negative. Are you using prep time?
No, we'll leave ourselves unmuted until we get that card. We're not. But I'll use it the second I get that card.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, we just got it. All right, starting now. Wait 3 minutes. Okay, that's 3 minutes.
So it's gonna go off-time roadmap, theory, their case, our case. So time will start on my first word. Oh, it's our case, their case, and then time will start. Let's start on theory. Remember, our interpretation is that all teams ought to post their cases on the NDCA wiki. The violation is that they didn't. Let's review the standard. The primary standard is argument quality. Without disclosure, debaters gain advantage by surprising opponents rather than presenting strong arguments. Disclosure ensures debaters focus on quality, allowing opponents time for thoughtful preparation. Additionally, sharing and improving ideas from each other's wikis fosters the development of superior arguments, promoting in-depth education on significant issues and helping small schools. Voters. There are 3 voters. Education. It's the reason schools fund debate and the only portable skill of debate. Inclusion. Without debate being the best it possibly can, they prevent teams from accessing the best benefits of debate in the first place. Evidence ethics. Misconstruing evidence is academic dishonesty and prevents actual engagement from the literature. Theory outweighs all substance because theory actually has the potential to change the way debates occur. Neither of us or our opponents are actually able to change anything related to trade deals, and therefore theory should determine the winner of the round. Their only response to theory is the fact that we could have emailed them, but they didn't have a wiki page at all with their contact info. Even then, future debaters will be able to have access to our opponent's email since they most likely will not have debated previously. Even then, sharing cases before round is not enough time to achieve our standards since we're aiming for arguments being available to all. And also teams being able to draft responses before the round, neither of which are possible if teams don't disclose with efficient time before the debate. Even then, let's talk about substance. The easiest place to vote here is climate change. Right now, we have both collaboration and protectionism. The US is competing with other countries for the climate crown, but the Paris Accords still exist, and we're still collaborating with developing countries. However, in their world, protectionism is taken away. We are forced to work with the EU because the trade agreement is comprehensive, therefore cover all standards. On their case, countries worked together during the pandemic because it was a threat that damaged everyone, and they couldn't risk losing more lives. They have no evidence that vaccines are too expensive for countries to afford and give no statistics during their whole contention on how many lives were lost because countries didn't trade vaccines enough. The card they sent us about solving COVID does not mention the word trade once. On economy, they don't get access to any of their economic benefits because nobody will buy American products. EU Horizons 24 writes American-made goods under the free trade agreement would not enjoy much success, as these imported goods are more costly than the European substitutes. Many American brands have also seen an overall decline in popularity among European consumers, with 70% of Europeans stating that they try to buy locally more often. There is simply not a high enough demand for American production that would sustain the initial profits outweighed by a free trade agreement in the long run. This outweighs on probability. They're using a trade deal that never even passed. On climate, cross-apply our contention. Right now, countries are competing with each other and cooperating. Protectionism goes away in their world. Climate is the bigger voting point because it affects everyone. So vote for us.
Yeah, I believe it's Grand Cross.
Yes.
All right, I guess I'll just start with the first question. So time will start now. Okay, so on the do you guys still think that the Paris Accords was like a bad thing, it wasn't successful? And if so, can you explain why?
Okay, we're just saying that the Paris Accords, like, it just isn't very efficient. Like, we're not saying it's not doing anything. We're just saying it's very slow. The United States literally left the Paris Accords because they thought it was useless. There's countries that aren't devoting any money to the Paris Accords at all. Like, yeah, maybe it's investing like a couple $1 billion, but right now we also have protectionism, which is investing trillions. So if we have both protectionism and the Paris Accords and stuff like cooperation, which is in the status quo by voting for neg, that's going to allow both to occur simultaneously, and we can solve the climate change with maximum efficiency.
Okay, just to clarify, can I have a follow-up?
Yeah.
Okay, so just to clarify what the Paris agreement did, because it was actually a lot, but
Yeah.
basically it reduced like the amount of so we were actually gonna increase like climate change, like the temperatures by like 7 degrees Fahrenheit and decrease that to 5. And also we had like many major countries commit to having carbon neutrality, which is also like a really, really important.
Wait a minute, wait a
And
minute.
we gave hundreds of billions of dollars
Yeah,
to
but are
developing
those
countries.
countries actually going climate neutral?
They have plans to. Yeah. Like we don't know if any country's actually gonna like hit carbon neutrality, but they
Okay.
express strong plans to do that.
Okay, yeah, sure. We can talk about that in Fun and Focus. Can I ask a question? We'll talk about the economy. So, like, if these Europeans don't buy these American goods, how is like America gonna like benefit from the economic benefits from a hypothetical trade agreement?
Okay, we don't really get your evidence on that, and first of all, because like the EU and the US are trading so much, like there's like as we say in our summary, right? There's like over like $800 billion with trade in there. So we don't really get like why you're saying that Europeans won't buy American goods. Like the EU clearly needs
It's
a lot
more,
of
yeah.
American goods.
No, I would say like the people who are actually trading are like these really big companies, like these monopolies or the governments or stuff like that. That's why they have so much money to spend in the first place. But our card is very specific when it senses like they just want to buy more domestic products. So it's just kind of like it's more of a mitigation. Like we want to believe exactly what you're saying, like both the economy is going to benefit, but we just don't know if that's actually true. But do you want a question?
Okay. Um, so you guys said like the US like left the Paris Accords or something, but we clearly say that in 2021 the US joined back the Paris Accords because it was
Yes, they
then.
did join back. They did join back.
Yeah.
It's just
So I
showing.
just want to clarify that point. I just want to clarify that point because I
No,
don't want
I,
any
I no,
misunderstanding.
I'm aware that the US did join back. That's just a fact, but it's the fact that they left in the first place because it was just so slow for them. And also, I'm pretty sure the reason they left was because of Trump, and he may win like the upcoming election. There's just so many reasons that the Paris Accords can't just be like believed to be this like new miracle that's going to solve climate change. But I mean, it's almost time.
Yeah, it's almost time. If you guys want a question, that's fine.
How was your day? That's my question.
You asked me that last time we faced. My day's good right now. It's pretty tiring.
Oh yeah, I know.
All right, that's time.
that's-
Thank you.
Okay. I would like to take my last 1 minute 30 of prep time, starting in 3, 2, 1. Okay, I think that's my time. As an uptime roadmap is going to go this roadmap, and then the one off, our case, weighing our case, their case. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Judge, the app is a vote for lives. Now, addressing the one-off, they said that we should have a wiki page because other opponents would struggle, but this isn't another opponent. They knew we would be joining the round. We are willing to provide any cards, and we have, and they have access to contact us before a round because they have our email. Just because we didn't establish a full wiki page doesn't mean we don't have sufficient disclosure or misconstruing evidence. Now, Judge, there is one key reason today why you should vote for us. 1, we are improving pandemic preparedness and accelerating responses, severely decreasing the number of deaths from 50 million deaths that would likely result from a new pandemic. And for a recession, we are preventing this economic catastrophe, which would throw 900 million people in poverty. And on climate, we are boosting green technologies and innovation, as well as harmonizing regulations to combat the 100 million people that die from every 0.1 degrees Celsius of warming. Now let's talk about our case. First, trade agreements harmonize countries, reduce barriers, allow for faster speed to address issues, and better transparency and supply, which is crucial to fighting pandemics. It's not about census, it's about transparency and speed, which the COVID card does mention. And 2, they never made a direct attack on why Hamel 17 says an agreement between the two economic powers would not only be EU's economy by 120 billion, the US economy by 90 billion, but also the economy of the rest of the world by 100 billion. $800 billion already traded between the two. Europeans not buying American goods is non-logical, and they say our evidence is strong when they have no empirics or anything that comes close to refuting this point. Third, green energy and increased trade and economic growth can also benefit the environment by supporting social welfare and encouraging investment in green energy and the development of green technology. And finally, developing countries. Our HAML 17 evidence states that 100 billion euros will be generated for the rest of the world and developing countries. Now let's talk about why their case fails. The Paris Agreement is an evolving agreement. It will change over time, but currently we've already seen changes as we've decreased the amount of global warming from 7 degrees to just 5 degrees. And they've also gifted 100 billion to many developing countries, allowing more cooperation, not between developed and developing. And one last thing, they have never mentioned once if the IRA actually had any emission decreases. They only mentioned the money. It's all about the money, but they never mentioned the actual impact on climate change. Thus, we affirm. Thank you.
Okay, we have no prep time, so it's just going to start on the one-off and then go to substance. We're just going to talk about the main points, starting with our case and then go to their case. So one-off, our case, their case. On theory, remember, we're arguing for the fact that teams need to disclose before the round. The primary standard is argument quality. Again, without disclosure, debaters gain advantage by surprising opponents rather than presenting strong arguments, and disclosure ensures debaters focus on quality, allowing opponents time for thoughtful preparation. This is really important as we can maximize the quality of arguments in the long run. But even then, secondly, again, we can share and improve ideas from each other when we post our cases on the wiki, because we can make these really good arguments so we can maximize the effects of debating. There are 3 voters. The first is education, as it's the reason like schools fund debate in the first place. We need to make it the best it can be. But also secondly, inclusion. Without debate being the best possible it can, these teams aren't going to be able to access the best benefits from debate in the first place. And third, evidence ethics. It incentivizes teams to actually go through the cards and make sure they say what they're saying like during constructive, because if there are cases on the like the wiki, we can inspect it to make sure that it's saying what they say. But even then, also for small schools too, so we can ensure that these big programs don't out-prep these small schools. But also, theory outweighs all substance because it actually has the potential to change the way that debates occur. Remember when we tell you that neither us or our opponents are going to be able to solve anything in relation to trade deals at all. But what we can solve is the way that the debate space is ran. We can ensure that we disclose in the future so we can have the best possible arguments and ensure that small schools aren't out-competed. But let's go to substance anyway. On the climate argument, the argument is very clear. Climate gets worse in their world because right now subsidies are allowing for investments like the Inflation Reduction Act, causing other countries to compete for the climate trial, which is why Japan, for example, invested trillions, and other countries did the same. Protectionism is the #1 reason Inflation Reduction Act was passed, and it will in the future. The main takeaway for the climate point is that right now the U.S. is collaborating too. How the U.S. is shifting towards protectionism simultaneously, meaning we can have the best of both worlds. However, in their world, we're only going to be collaborating because we are forced to, because the trade agreement is comprehensive. That's really bad because it's going to take way too long. That's why the Paris Accords are so slow. At least right now in the status quo, when you vote for us, we're going to have both protectionism and collaboration, which solves climate change with maximum efficiency. But let's go to the 2 other points. First, on pandemics, again, we tell you right now, these countries are already incentivized to work together to fix pandemics because it's killing millions in their own country. So they're already doing what they can. But also, secondly, on economy, I would also say, again, this is a fact that it's very like stingy. We don't know if it's actually going to happen because they're using a thing that never even got passed. And secondly, we don't even know if Europeans are going to buy American goods. Vote for theory to save the debate space, and vote for climate change because it affects everyone.
Okay, good round, guys.
You're really good round, you guys.
Nice job,
Good
Bill.
round.
Mhm. Okay. We'll be back.